My name is Fredrik Heinz. I'm from Linköping University. I'm also the president of the Swedish AI Society and a member of the European Commission High-Level Expert Group on AI. And I have had the great fortune here of being able to assemble a great panel that we're going to discuss the future of AI in Europe. So basically, the background is the following, that AI has been recognized as one of the most important topics of our time. And we see that basically every country on the planet is scrambling to find a way to take a leading position and making the most out of AI. Of course, Europe has had a long tradition of successful research and innovation in the area of AI. But many still feel that Europe needs to do much more in order to be at the forefront of AI development. So the purpose of this panel is to discuss the future of AI in Europe from a high-level perspective. Right after this panel, there will be another one where we will be discussing the AI strategy, the European AI strategy. So please welcome our distinguished panelists. So actually, almost from the left here, we have Khalil Rouhana, who is the General Director General for Communications, Networks, Content, and Technology at the European Commission. Next to him, we have Francesca Rossi from IBM and the University of Padua. Then we have Max Tegmark from MIT, who many of you just heard invite and talk by. Sitting next to him, we have Morten Irgens from Oslo Metropolitan University, and also one of the people who have started this CLARE initiative. Next to him, we have Barry O'Sullivan from University College Cork, and also the Vice President of EurAI, the European AI Association. Then we have Peter Eriksson, who is the Swedish Minister for Housing and Digital Development, who is basically responsible for IT and digitalization questions in the Swedish government. And finally, but not least, we have Bazmi Hussein, who is the CTO of ABB. So please welcome our panelists. So before this panel, I sent a short list of questions to the panelists that I wanted them to think about. So the first question is, what are the strengths and weaknesses of AI in Europe today? So basically, where are we today? And the second question is, where would you like AI in Europe to be in 5 to 10 years perspective? So a little bit medium-term perspective. And then maybe the most interesting question, namely, what do we need to do now in order to get there to realize these visions? So the order that we will follow here today is that each panelist will get 4 minutes to have an opening statement. After that, we will have a discussion around each of these questions, and then we will open the floor to questions from the audience. And at the end, each panelist will get 1 minute to make a final remark. Okay. So maybe we can take the panelists in the order that they are listed. So we can start with Khalil. And please be sure to talk in the microphones because this is being recorded. And it's also important that everyone in the room can hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. Europe's strengths and weaknesses in artificial intelligence. If I simplify, Europe's strength is in digital in general, and in AI in particular, is in embedding digital in all types of artifacts and physical artifacts. We're very good at putting smartness into all types of products, from cars to trains to planes, to health, to factories. This is where our strength is in digital, and this is also our strength in artificial intelligence. We're good in robotics, industrial robotics. We're good in service robots. And we have the skills to design complex physical artifacts that are with intelligence inside. This is where we're very strong, still industrially. And that's because also we have the rest of the value chains in Europe, the automotive industry, production machines, etc. And that's a major asset for us for the future. It's a major asset for the future development of AI, because we do believe that the real value of AI is by its use across all sectors of the economy. And by integration, all developments of AI across all the economy. This is where we want Europe to be in 5 years. We want to make sure that the benefits of AI are seized by all our businesses, whatever their size, whatever sector they are in, and wherever they're located in the Union. That's where we want to be. And we also can rely on another strength, which is the strength of our academic community, our research labs, where also we have some of the best researchers in this field, and we would like them to also be among the best in the future. That's also what we want to be in 5–10 years. We would like to have still the best research teams, some of the best research teams around the world here in Europe. And we will do what is needed to get there. I'll come back to that. These are, I would say, if I summarize the two major strengths, industrial strength in the vertical sectors and a very good academic community to build on. What are our weaknesses? Our weaknesses are our weak presence on the web platforms in general, which is a handicap because that means less access to data to the industry in Europe as something we need to make sure we address in the future, having data more accessible on a large scale for innovators, for creators in Europe. We see a very dynamic movement of startups and new companies developing around artificial intelligence. We need to make sure that we give them the fuel that is necessary for this, which is data, as something we need to work on for the future. Europe has never been good in consumer products, and that's also something we need to look at, because AI will develop also for the consumer market, and we need to be there in the future. What do we do about it to get there? We need three things. First, to make sure that we get the investments done in Europe, both in our excellence, but also the investments for our industry to flourish, from startups to large companies, going through medium companies to engage in AI, integrate AI into their products, or develop new businesses around artificial intelligence. The investment from the public side to support our technology and our excellence in research and development. Investment from the public side to build the capacities that are needed in Europe, from data sets, supporting the development of open space for data sets. From the public sector to start with, and also investments into computing capacities, or what is needed for AI to flourish in Europe. Investment from the public side, but investment that draws also private investments and making sure we have access to finance, from venture capital to loans, for the engagement in AI across the industry. This is also where we need to come in. Reinforce our technology, industrial capacities. Investments is key, and we have a big step to do in this in order to be able to attract investment in Europe from across the world. Second area is looking at the ethical and legal issues. It's extremely important. People fear AI. People have the impression that robots will be replacing them, that AI will develop in a non-transparent way without respecting human rights. We need to make sure that we reassure and we engage in artificial intelligence, respecting European values for the future. Human rights, transparency, democracy, extremely important. And for that, we have set up a big alliance and an expert group, high-level expert group, that looks at ethical issues, and we would need to come very quickly, hopefully, by the end of the year, if not by the beginning of 2019, with some guidelines of how to make sure that AI develops while respecting our ethics and values. And with our other issues that we need to address on the legal side to ensure that we adapt our legal framework if needed for AI to develop in the right way. And the third area, which is extremely important, is about skills and adapting our workforce. We need to look at our educational systems, how they should be evolving in order to be fit for a world where we have more autonomy in all types of objects, and how we need to reskill our workforce to be able to be fit for the AI developments. That's, in few words, what needs to be done, where we think Europe is strong, and how it can develop for the future.
Thank you. And then we'll leave the floor to Peter Eriksson, please.
Okay, thank you. I certainly feel that Europe is lagging behind in this respect. We see that the United States and China are leading this work on AI and machine learning. And although we feel in Sweden that we are very good and should always be the best in digitization and these aspects, and it in reality is so that we are lagging behind here. And but there is now coming a change. I think maybe you can say it started last year, but going from the feeling that there is something going on, but we don't know what it is, to see that we see there is a train leaving very soon, and we have to hurry up to be on the train. That is maybe the change we see now, and we have taken a few steps in Sweden the last year in this direction. We have taken a position, we have taken decisions in our innovation authorities that really promote AI in many ways, and companies, entrepreneurs in this direction. And we have also private funds coming up in a big degree in Sweden, and also governmental money now. So there is a couple of €100 million spending the coming years on AI in Sweden, and we also feel very much that it's important that Europe is coming also in this area, because if Sweden is behind, Europe is still further behind in this aspect. And we have, of course, as you say, researchers and scientists that is very good, and also some places and centers that are extremely good. But if you see it in the total, Europe is way behind, and the countries that are doing some better things is probably Germany, England, and the parts of Sweden also. But we have to do a lot of things to change this thing, to be on the train now very soon. And one thing is, of course, research and scientists and more fundings there. But I think we also need to make changes in the whole education system. We need to do a lot more in aspects of lifelong learning, and see the insurance system, the education system, all through from high school to universities, and come in with training and education as a ordinary daily thing in every work, instead of something that you do before you go to try to get to work, and then education is finished. This left over from the industrial days, it's something we have to change, and I am promoting that right now. We are doing something in the right direction, but not enough at all. So I think maybe that's a shift in thinking that is the most important thing, because we have entrepreneurs, we are starting to have money, but the sort of organization of our communities is not in place for this swift change in labor market, in companies, in technology that people have to get used to if we are going to be not only in the front but together with people, because the risk is very much that we leave a lot of people and communities and places way behind. If technology is moving faster than people see that they are aware and in it. So I think the change must be in the whole of society. We can't get the small elite that is working with the new techniques and making a society that is not in accordance with what normal people believe that is in their future and in their societies, and so they can take part of the future and the successes that and the possibilities that AI can bring.
Thank you very much. Then we'll leave the floor to Bazmi Hussein, please.
Thank you. I think if we look at the strengths that I think are there in Europe, first of all, I think Europe is well positioned, especially in industries with very high degree of automation. And I think that is a necessary condition for deployment of newer technologies, number one, but also in many of these industries, I think things like machine learning has been used for quite some years to have solutions on, predictive maintenance or condition monitoring. So I think that's a good base to start with. I think there's also a good educated workforce that is there. I think a lot of young people are pretty much digital natives. There's a higher degree of digitalization, so that is also, I think, some of the strength that is there. If you look on the weaknesses side, I agree that I think in one sense Europe has been slow. US in 2016 already had come out with a national plan on AI. Last year, China came out with a plan with a clear aim to have dominance in that area by 2030. Japan, Korea, I think all these countries have also articulated their plans. And if you look at, the pace of progress, then China has, I think, look at publication statistics, China has already overtaken the US as well as the highest number of publications that come out. But when you look at countries in Europe, individually they are, of course, much less. But if you look at that from an EU perspective and you aggregate that, actually it is a much better picture. It would be in excess of the publications you get from the US, for instance. But I think what is important is that there needs to be a coordinated effort. There has to be an EU-level plan that has to come out very quickly so that there's coordination on the research part for there. So I think that is very important. The other thing is the investment that goes in. I mean, looking at statistics, US still invests about twice as much as Asia, which invests twice as much as Europe, okay, roughly. Clearly, I think those are big differences. They also need to be addressed. If you look at the number of startups as well, I think that is reflected in that investment differences. So there are fewer startups here than in US. So I think that is also has to be encouraged and looked into. I think US and China have another advantage that is there, which is there are large private players that are there. Okay, you have the Googles and the Microsofts or the Baidus, which have huge amounts of data that helps them develop, AI in a good way because they have a lot of access to good data. So I think if you look 5-10 years from now, I think what would be good to see is that today a lot of AI focus is towards consumers or towards government functions. Okay, but I think there has to be also focus towards some of the societal issues that are there. I mean, how could AI help in addressing global warming or food and water issues? That's one thing. I think the other thing is that from an industry perspective, I think we see a move towards more autonomous systems. And it'll not just be cars that'll be autonomous. Okay, there's ships, there'll be trains, there would be factories, there would be mines. I think there's a whole range of opportunities there where I think Europe is actually quite well placed to take the lead in that, So I think going towards more on the industrial side might be a strategy to have. The other thing, many of the issues related to AI are probably sometimes more ethical than they are legal, or than they are technical. So they should be, I think, also effort to have a good ethical and legal framework in place, because that, I think, is going to help the process. I think what really needs to be done is make this place more attractive for global talent. Okay, I think there is a huge opportunity for that, and that I think should be leveraged. I think public-private partnerships focusing on let us say pilots. I think these are all things that should be promoted, and that'll have a lot of benefit that comes from that. The other thing is that they are, I think, related areas as well. For example, anything related with AI is very compute intensive. So in 5 to 10 year time frame, quantum computing, for example, because in order to take advantage of quantum computing, you need a completely new set of skills to use that. It's not just about the equipment, it's how you're going to use that. So I think those things have to be included in curriculum, and educational systems have to adapt for that too. So.
Thank you. Then we have Morten Irgens. Please.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. We'll try to avoid being redundant, so my list of Europe's strengths will be shorter. Let me start with saying that I believe that the background for this panel might be that something wonderful is happening, very positive is happening in the world, and that is this very strong growth in science and technology all over the world. But since science and technology are drivers for innovation and competitiveness, there is an argument for Europe to not fall behind, obviously. It is sometimes said that the best way to meet the future is to create it. Europe, with its strengths in technology and science, in research, in AI, in universities, in the research institutes, in companies, is in an excellent position to create its own future. If it were any other area, I would say, and now I'm referring to the increased competition, which I started with saying is very wonderful, it's positive. But it also have this competitive side. And I would say if it was any other area, I would say good for whoever is running ahead and charges ahead and passes in front of us. There is so many other things we can compete on and be good at. But when it comes to building intelligent machines, if I should use that in air quotes here now, that may transform or establish dominance in any imaginable area, from customer goods to security, I believe that Europe better take control of its own destiny in many ways. Europe should not leave creating its future completely to others. We need to be a part of creating that future. This conference has, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think it has about 800 accepted papers. Is that correct?
710.
It is in Europe, and I think less than 20% of the papers are European. So then I get to the main weakness here, which is the volume. We need to do more research in AI. We need to increase the number of researchers, increase the number of AI labs, increase the number of universities that work on AI. And we're scattered, and we could be more mission-driven. So where would we like to be? It's one of the questions. And I believe that Europe's approaches to move ahead so far has been in some nations, some countries. I believe where we like to be, Europe needs to pool its resources. We will not make a dent divided, because each nation has, even the strongest one in Europe, does not have enough resources to do that. So we need to pool our resources, and we need to focus on utilizing diversity that Europe has, which is a source of innovation. And we need to focus on excellence. And we need to focus on a mix of mission and curiosity-driven research. So how do we get there? How do we get there? Well, I'm representing CLAIRE. It's an acronym that stands for a Confederation of Laboratories for AI in Europe. It is a grassroots-driven movement, if you can call it that. And what we are arguing for is that Europe needs, and I'm going to use now air quotes, a CERN for AI, a global brand recognition of a coherent, focused work on moving up AI as a major area of research in Europe. And that means that we need strong regional centers of excellence and a central hub, a state-of-the-art Google-scale infrastructure, a focal point for exchange and interaction, a central hub that is a coordinator of some very large-scale projects, and where scientific staff from around Europe can spend time and come back to their own regional centers of excellence and bring their knowledge and experience from working in this larger project into this more regional and national labs. So that will also create a global brand recognition, which I do believe is important for AI research in Europe. And also, I believe that a European focus on AI needs to and should have the human in the center. Human-centered AI. That could be a unique and strong focus for AI in Europe. Furthermore, I believe such an initiative should have strong processes for citizen engagement, for user-driven research as well. So how do we get there? Well, there are grassroots movements now from researchers, from scientists. Go there and support this movement. That puts us in a position when politicians are looking for answers and looking for solutions, and we are among the best to give them that. So start a dialogue and go online and to, for instance, the CLARE initiative and the ELIS initiative, 2 different initiatives in Europe today, and sign up the petitions so that we put the scientists in position for having a good dialogue in how we move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we have Barry O'Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Frederick. So it's a pleasure to be here. So thanks for inviting me to participate. So strengths and weaknesses. I suppose I think we've said it. It's been said before, but I think one of Europe's significant strengths is its people. Now, we have really excellent researchers. We have excellent entrepreneurs. A strange thing is happening, though, and that is many of our best and brightest are not staying in Europe. If you think of people who have effectively invented the self-driving car, they are German, not working in Europe. Over here is a very famous Swede who's not working in Sweden. Right. And so what are the, so we have to ask ourselves, what are the reasons why our best and brightest don't do what they do in Europe? And that's because we don't create the environment for them to do that. And there's a few things here. I suppose one is, how we fund research. I think that's a significant issue. We have been very fortunate in that we still have a significant research budget in Europe, despite the economy that we've had. But one of my favorite essays on science is from 1939. I'd recommend you read it. It's called "The Usefulness of Useless Knowledge." It's from Harper's Magazine, and it basically makes the point. It basically makes the point that we should significantly invest in fundamental blue skies research. And there's a nice line in the paper, in the essay, that sort of talks about the fact that we need more Maxwells and Hertz and fewer Marconis, because the ideas are what creates the value. And I think one thing we should be doing over the next number of years is ensuring that while it is absolutely important that we have sort of innovation type research, that we have research that puts researchers and industry together, we should not lose sight of the fact that we need significant investment, more investment than we have now, 2x, 3x, 4x more investment in basic research, because that will retain the very best minds that we have, and it will create a system that we, I think that we currently lack to some extent. I suppose one of the disadvantages that Europe has is fragmentation. So while obviously we're almost all of us are part of the European Union, we still tend to think along member state levels, along national levels. And so there's a lot of things that are going on in a repetitive fashion. So most European nations now have a national plan for AI, and lots of those national plans, if you were to remove the country's name and put them on the table, people would not be able to tell the difference between one and the other, I think. So we should really work together. I think the future for AI research in Europe is by doing it together. And I commend what the Commission are doing now in exactly that, with the AI Alliance and the initiative that Khalil mentioned earlier. So this idea that we work together, this is extremely important. I think one of the big strengths that we have in Europe is that we have a particular sort of set of ethics and sort of social consciousness that might not be so keen in other parts of the world, and I think this is to our advantage. So I think we do sort of collectively buy into the idea that there is a social floor that people should not be allowed to go below, you know. So, and this raises all sorts of interesting issues around, you know, whether or not there's going to be job replacement or whatever, all these sorts of things. We need to think about what is society going to look like in when AI has a significant impact on us. So, you know, for example, if somebody loses a job to a robotic system of some sort, you know, is that a different form of redundancy than someone, you know, from a company that just goes bust or something like this? So all of these sort of social policies, we need to think about them very, very carefully. And I think one of the you know, while we have been slow to some extent, you know, if you compare Europe to China and the US, I think we have been putting in the foundations, I think, to really put us on the right path. So if you look at things like the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, I look at that actually as a piece of AI legislation, because it talks about the protection of privacy, it talks about, you know, what companies can and can't do, it talks about legal bases, it talks about explanation, all the kinds of things that we need in terms of transparency and so on. And we naturally, as Europeans, think like that. And I think this will be to our advantage. And I suppose we need to invest in technologies that support transparent, ethical AI, which I think is really what the recent AI communication from the Commission focused on. So I think that is playing to our strengths. People have mentioned funding. I suppose, you know, as an academic, there's never enough research funding. You know, but I think there really isn't enough funding at the basic level, as I say. So this is really, really important. But just turning to a second to the other kinds of funding, so entrepreneurial funding, you know, venture capital and so on. We are really behind the US, and I think there's a major threat coming down the road for Europe, which is Brexit. And why is Brexit a challenge for us in terms of AI? It's a challenge for us in AI because almost all of the very large startups in artificial intelligence are in London. So if you look at the companies that are, you know, raising, you know, hundreds of millions of euros in research, in venture capital, these companies are in London. And the question is, what happens post-Brexit? You know, what happens to that brilliance? You know, so, you know, the number 1 and number 2 universities, depending how you count, you know, are in the UK. So what's going to happen to, you know, so this is a huge threat for us. So we need to get this right. I suppose there's a very practical thing that we need to do, which the US gets right and we don't get right, and that is in the whole area of patenting. So whether or not we like it, patenting is extremely important to protecting intellectual property and commercialization and all of these sorts of things. And we have a very draconian approach to patenting, particularly for software. So we need to get that resolved. So I suppose really just in, you know, there are some risks, obviously. I think one of the biggest risks in my mind, apart from things like Brexit and lack of funding and all the rest of it, is hype. I think hype is not our friend. So, you know, we should be going out and communicating a lot more, and that's one thing that we all need to do as scientists and we all need to do as experts in the field. You know, tell the world what is real and what is not real, because we don't want to oversell AI in the sense that, you know, the public believes it's capable of doing something that it just simply isn't. So I suppose, in summary, strengths are things, I suppose, are people. We need to figure out a way of retaining our people, bringing them home, so to speak, creating the environment that they will flourish, that involves you know, significant investment in research funding, significant investment in, I suppose, breaking down national barriers. So Europe is a single coherent place rather than a you know, a federation of states, which is essentially how it operates as a practical level. We have great strengths, like EurAI, of which I'm happy to represent here, is actually one of the largest AI research societies in the world. I think it's second only to an AI society in Asia, which we'll rename nameless. But I think we have a lot to be optimistic about. We have a lot to be positive about, and I think the thing that we will do in the next 10 years is we will develop an AI industry. We have the potential to create an AI industry in Europe that is very socially aware, and I think as Europeans, I suppose our culture will come through in that technology, and that's a great opportunity.
Thank you very much. Then we have Francesca Rossi, please.
Yes, so, well, many things have been said that I agree on, so I will focus on a few of them, and also my personal path. I'm also one of those people that grew up in Europe. I'm Italian. I've been in Italian academia for 20-something years, and then I decided to go and work for IBM in the United States. So I've been exposed to two different ways of approaching AI and trying to understand and to harness the impact that AI has in real world from the academic point of view and also from the corporation point of view, and also from Europe and from the US. So I cannot say that I know as well the US environment as the European one, of course, because I spent most of my life in Europe, but I can see the strengths and weaknesses of this. And I think that in my path, I also collaborated. Besides these two main entities that I worked on, I also collaborated with many other associations and institutes and organizations that led me to think about, not just improving the technology per se, but also making sure that this technology is beneficial for our society and for everybody, and to understand what that means and what that means. And so my path started, for example, in that way. It started from the Future of Life Institute, where I met Max in 2014, I think, at MIT. And then I joined the advisory board, and then I joined the advisory board of other associations with similar goals, and then I co-founded the partnership on AI with other companies and many other partners. I joined IEEE to put together guidelines for developers of AI. So I saw many different institutions and organizations that had the same goal to help understand how AI could be beneficial in its impact on society, but with different specific strengths and specific angles. And overall, my overall bottom line here is that, as Barry said, what works is a very multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder approach. So it cannot, making AI beneficial and impactful in the right way cannot be done just by AI people, AI researchers. AI researchers may find technical solutions to problems, may brainstorm, but together with people from other disciplines. So that's one very important thing. And also multi-stakeholder, meaning that we have to collaborate not just among experts in academia or companies of various disciplines, but also with people that are going to be impacted by AI, and not just those that produce AI, but also those who are going to be used or forced to use in their everyday life with AI system. So that's really a bottom line, and I think that Europe is a very good place to implement these two principles, to be collaborative, multidisciplinary, and multi-stakeholder. Another thing that was said is that Europe is slow. But as Barry mentioned, I mean, I don't have this impression that Europe is slow, because you have to think that the progress in AI is not, in my view, only about the technology itself, but also about this safety engineering part. And the fact that Europe produced the GDPR so much in advance compared to US and China and all the other parts of the world, it means that in Europe, this idea of this powerful technology that we have to understand how to harness has been there for a long time, because to produce a piece of legislation, of course, it takes some time. So the brainstorming started long ago. And so that means that there is the right environment in Europe to really understand how to harness this technology. Another thing that was mentioned that I was not really agreeing a lot was that this general feeling that technology is going very fast, we have to catch up. And I think that the role of policies and guidelines and is not to catch up, but actually to drive the technology towards a certain vision of the future. So we don't have to say, oh my God, AI is not fair, so we have to put some patches to make it fair and unbiased. Oh my God, it's not explainable, so let's do something to make it explainable in this specific context. We have to think where we want to live in 10 or 20 years, how we want us to interact, to work, to be treated by the government, all the aspects of our life. And then we say, okay, now whether we have that clear, or maybe not completely clear in all details, but once we have an idea where we want to go, and now that we know that the state of the current technology, and in that respect, definitely there is a lot to do in education and explaining exactly where the technology is, especially to policymakers. Yeah, and so I'm not talking about you, but in general. But then, we know where the technology is, we know where we want to go, and then let's say, what do we need to do to drive the technology towards that vision of the future? Because if we just try to catch up of the various problems that we see at every single day, then we run the risk of not being able to completely, be rational about where we drive the technology. And again, I think that Europe is one of the best places to do that, because Europe, compared to China, compared to the US, has, I think, the potential of this very, potential of combining in the right way the bottom-up expression of the citizens, the values of the people, and the top-down regulation, something that in US is different, in the US, basically, private companies are free to innovate, and then if problem appears, then you try to understand what to do. In China, is a different situation, more top-down and so on. So in Europe, you have the potential of really achieving this nice compromise. So also, in my view, we have to understand that Europe has a lot of strength in the kind of AI that maybe at this point of the hype may seem kind of old-fashioned. But in fact, I don't think it is, because it's the kind of AI that we need, together with deep learning, machine learning, to actually achieve a significant, step forward in AI, meaning as a technology that can understand, can be whatever intelligent means, it can be intelligent, because we don't have to confuse the exceptional perception capabilities that machine learning approaches have given us by analyzing huge amounts of data with really understanding, being able to do inference, reasoning, causality, counterfactual, all sorts of reasoning capabilities that you need if you really want to inject intelligence, again, whatever that means, in a machine. So I think all these angles make me think that Europe is the best place. I'm very happy to be part of this high-level expert group where I see multidisciplinarity, multi-stakeholders that will possibly inform the European Commission about what to do for the future. And I was also very happy to support the CLARE initiative because I really think that a collaborative, distributed effort in research in Europe is really needed.
Thank you. So before we go to Max, Peter has requested to get a word.
Oh, okay. Well, wouldn't Max start to say his first?
But you can just...
Okay. I just wanted to say that when we talk about Europe in this way, I think that it is really important to stress that human rights and rule of law is some kind of basic values in Europe that I wouldn't say in this respect it's an advantage, but it is basic for the future, and that's a reason for Europe to really be strong in this area, because that is not the case. Human rights and rule of law is not the case that it's stressed and important in all other states in the world. And when we talk about artificial intelligence, this must be in the front and must be more important in the future. If you take, for example, the question around integrity, and see the GDPR that people are now so angry about. It's something that could not happen coming from China or the United States, and it has good sides, really mean that. And that is also important when we talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence. And that is maybe the value that Europe needs to stress, that we could promote these kind of values, and also in the global sense see that this is a necessary part of the development in this area, not something that you put on afterwards.
Thank you very much. Okay, Max, now it's your turn.
First of all, I agree with all the remarks that have been said here very strongly. Let me complement them a little bit, and I'll organize my thoughts around three things: funding, leadership, and ethics. So first, the bad news, then some good news. The bad news, obviously, is that we in Europe used to be #1 in computer science. Charles Babbage, Augusta Byron, Alan Turing, these were all Europeans. Then we became #2. And then we talked a great deal about how we should try to become #1 again and catch up on the US. Instead, we became #3. Even though we have more people than the US and a larger GDP than the US. That's embarrassing. So on the topic, so what can we do about that? On the positive side, well, first of all, in terms of funding, I think we actually have an opportunity versus the US now, thanks to the fact that the US, in my opinion, has rather sloppy leadership in enacting some rather poor policies. I've been following, this is a perspective from across the Atlantic here, right? If you look at the US budget, the only thing that's growing a lot is military funding, and the budget for basic research, which I completely agree with you is so central, is being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. If you ask why is Silicon Valley in America, not in Europe, it's because of the massive funding that went into American science, technology, and engineering in the 60s because of the space race and the leadership that came with it, right? Why did China also overtake Europe? Because, again, it's massive funding injected by the Chinese government coupled with leadership. And now, as America is really wobbling in a big way, this is an opportunity. Rather than just sit around and whine about things we don't like about what the US government is doing, hey, it's an opportunity to overtake them in the race. That's a plus. Okay? It's a silver lining to everything. Even certain politicians, which will not be mentioned. Second, in terms of funding, I think the fact that Silicon Valley is in the US is a really nice model for what can happen here. I am very excited about the CLARE initiative, and I think the CERN initiative is, I'm glad you mentioned it because that's a great role model to follow. You know, there we had the case where the US was #1 in high energy physics. And because of it, in my opinion, poor leadership in the US, they successfully closed one after the other of all the American particle colliders for high energy. They're all gone and kept cutting funding. And we saw this amazing brain drain where all my top colleagues in high energy particle physics now come to Europe. You know? This is something that can be done again. Moving from and finally funding, I heard the number mentioned of a few hundred million. I forget whether it was kronor or dollars or euros. That's yeah, but that's still a number I think is way too small. we shouldn't think of AI funding as just one out of 500 different research categories. We should think about the fact that in 20 years, the fraction of the European economy which will be driven by the technologies that come out of this is going to be huge. We can argue about whether it's going to be 80% or 10% or 20%, but it's certainly not going to be the tiny percent that, you know, that 300 million euros is of the Swedish budget. It's going to be big. If you think about what percentage of the Swedish economy is there because of the large Swedish multinational companies that are represented even on this panel, right? It's much bigger percentages than these sort of small amounts. So this is we shouldn't think of this even as a cost. It's the best investment we can make in the economy of our children, and even in what's going to happen in the next 10 years, is to invest in this basic research and technology that's going to grow the economic pie. So enough about funding. Let me say a few words about leadership. Here again, I have some bad news and some good news. I think the bad news, which was already echoed here, is that the European Union is weak and fragmented in its leadership. And it's worth just reflecting a little bit on how embarrassing it is. And I hope you don't mind me being a little bit blunt, but like, look, for example, at what happened recently with when America decided to pull out of the Iran deal and said that European companies are going to be sanctioned if they continue their business in Iran. I met the CEO of Total, the biggest French oil company, at a conference the other month. He was furious. He was furious. You know, they've invested billions of euros in Iran, and now some guy across the ocean tells his company that they have to divest and lose a lot of this money. And he was furious not just at the American leadership, but at the European Union, because they did nothing for him, basically just losing his money. And I thought to myself, I actually asked him this, you know, how do you think America would react if the European Union just announced that Texaco is going to face massive sanctions unless they fully divest from Mexico? How do you think Donald Trump would react? America would be livid. They'd be, how dare you Europeans come tell us where we can do business? And they would promptly come back and say, okay, for every dollar that you find Texaco and Chevron, we're gonna make British Petroleum pay that same fine, or maybe even double. And very quickly the European Union would back off, you know. Did the European Union do that? We could have. We didn't. And so with more leadership, being more assertive in our policies, we can do a lot of things which doesn't even cost money. It's just a matter of being strong and united. And I know you mentioned before that the European Union is quite fragmented. This is true. But it would be incorrect to say that because the European Union is kind of fragmented, it's impossible to have strong leadership. Because in a way, I think the causation goes in the opposite direction. You know, you're well aware of a lot of polls saying that a lot of Europeans are dissatisfied with the European Union and ask, what does the European Union do for me? And we just had Britain vote to leave, right? If stuff like what happened, I can tell you for sure that a lot of French people who work for Total did not fall more in love with the European Union after how they just rolled over on their back when America did this stuff, right? So if the European Union can be strong and really stand up and say, hey, we have a bigger GDP than the US, we have more people, and we're going to fight for a level playing field, I think a lot of people are going to say, hey, yeah, European Union is great. We're strong together. You know, the idea, divide and conquer, that strategy was invented in Europe by your ancestor, Francesca, from the Roman Empire, right? But it's being used against us. I think we should take it back and show some real leadership. And for some good news, there is a tradition of this also in the past. CERN was mentioned as a great example of where we showed leadership and retook the leadership in high-energy physics. An even bigger one was the welfare state. Where was it invented? It was invented in Europe. People did exactly what Francesca said as they were emerging from the rubble and ruins of World War II and said, what kind of future do we really envision that we will be inspired to steer towards with all this new technology? And people started thinking, wouldn't it be great if we, for the first time in history, can take all this new technology and create a welfare state where this technology works for the benefit of all Europeans, where we can have free education, kindergarten through college, where we can have free health care, where we can have a social safety net for those who need it, free retirement. Of course, there were lots of people who said that's impossible. There's still lots of people who say it's impossible over where I live. But we did it in Europe. And this was such a successful leadership that no country in Europe I've ever been to, and I think I've been to all of them larger than Luxembourg, wants to get rid of these things. People feel this is something that really works, that really makes them proud to be European. And this is being emulated, this leadership, in other parts of the world. Even China now, if you've followed their new healthcare reform, it's inspired not by the US healthcare system, but by the European ideas. So this kind of leadership, we have shown it before, and I think we have a wonderful opportunity to do it again. And finally, let me say a few words about ethics. We talked about money, and we talked about leadership. So for ethics, this is also something where we Europeans really have a fantastic tradition which really drove the whole idea of the welfare state, right? To see how can we really create a better world with this technology, rather than just, okay, say, let's have a night watchman state and let the strongest take power and see what happens. Instead, have a very active government that's there really to serve the needs of the citizens. And the European Union, we have over 400 million people here who feel that that's a good idea. And this can be brought to bear on all these other ethical issues that are raised now by AI. And the world will follow. I know some people whine and complain about the GDPR. I love it. And so do all my American friends. You know why? You have no idea how much less spam I'm getting all of a sudden, even from American companies. And the few things I get magically now have a little thing at the bottom, unsubscribe. One more click, gone forever. That would never have happened if it weren't for European leadership, right? And that's just one small example out of so many where when Europe leads, people see, wow, yeah, more of this. In terms of specific issues, there's privacy, human rights, and so on. That's been covered at length by other panelists. I won't say anything more about that. In terms of military technology, I mentioned, for those of you who were in my talk, the big push now to try to draw a line in the sand between what's okay use of AI and what's not, and try to ban certain kinds of lethal autonomous weapons. This is something where the European Union really could show its moral leadership. So far, again, I'm embarrassed that Austria is for this, and Sweden has said, well, we're still thinking about it. Maybe we'll, I would love to hear more thoughts from you later about how Sweden can step up here. But the fact of the matter is, this is, I think, also very much a symptom of the same weak leadership that we displayed in the trade disputes now and over the Iran deal. You know, I keep hearing, oh, we can't do this because because we're like NATO, and what if Trump gets upset with us? And that's said so often, it seems like a good argument. But I think to myself, I live in Boston. When did I last hear an American say, oh, we can't do this military thing because our NATO allies in Europe wouldn't like it? Ha! What a joke. They would never say that because they're so used to the idea that they lead and Europe follows, right? But there are more people here than there are there in Europe, and there's absolutely no reason why Europe can't lead also on ethical issues to do with military things. If Donald Trump wants Europe to pay more money in NATO fees, well, then he would have to listen a little bit to what Europeans think. So that's one where Europe can really lead and establish clear policies for what's okay uses of AI and what's not, which will probably be copied throughout the world. And finally, we have the issue of jobs, income inequality. Here, I think the US and China are both unlikely to provide very useful leadership. But we in Europe have a unique opportunity to show the way. This is where the welfare state was invented, right? And we know in Europe that if we can grow the economic pie enormously with AI, of course there's going to be enough resources to take care of everybody, not just in terms of providing income for them somehow, but also in creating purpose in their lives. And I think what I would like to see here now is large-scale experiments in different European countries to really figure out with research, basic research, what works best. You know, there was a universal basic income trial in Holland and Finland. I think it's really interesting to try other things too. If the government is going to give out money anyway from tax revenue, why just give them cash when you can use the same money to hire more teachers, hire more nurses, the sort of jobs that really give people not just income but purpose. If Europe figures out the way to crack this and make everybody better off with AI, again, the world will follow, everyone will be better off.
Thank you very much. Since we have a large and very knowledgeable panel, we're actually kind of running out of time already. So therefore, I want you in the audience to think of your questions, and I will let you in right in a second. But I want to ask the policy makers, or actually, okay, Khalil, you get the word first, and then I will ask my question then.
Many thanks. I was going to say we should engage Max for the European elections that are coming. Totally agree on what was said about, together we can certainly lead. All together, and Francesca said it also very clearly, and many of the panelists before. Europe is in the making, and together is not easy to achieve. But I think I don't think there's a choice. I totally agree with that. And I agree as well that we have values, and we're a trusted continent, and this is a major asset for us, so we need to continue on that line. Trusted in terms of values, trusted in terms of respect of human rights, etc. But our credibility is also important, and the credibility, to be credible, you have to be strong. What Peter said about, in order to make sure that our values are respected worldwide, you need to have the technology, you need to have the industry in Europe. And investment is essential. It's good because today we're discussing the European budget. And then in the coming weeks, between now and the end of the year, hope the member states will have their opinions already on where to go. The Commission has proposed an ambitious budget for research, for innovation, and a new digital program where artificial intelligence is a key part. I hope that will be followed and we get what we want. I know that Sweden has been always, and we'll get Peter, has been always a big supporter of the investment on research and innovation. Hope that will continue. The comparison with the US on the military side is always an issue. The investment in military in the US includes a huge investment in technology, as you know. I mean, the budget for research and innovation on the defense side in the US is around $90 billion per year. The EU budget for research and innovation, all included so far, is around 10 billion on the EU side. If we include the member states, all the public investment in all areas is around 100 billion. Just the military side of the US is 90 billion. That gives an idea. So I think this means that there's no way any of the member state by its own can match this volume and the focus that it brings. It's only by acting together that we can do it. We have a plan. We're working on 2 tracks in getting our act together on artificial intelligence. One is with a group of the member states to agree together on a common plan by the end of the year, how to move ahead, what needs to be done by the member state, what could be done by the EU. This is with a group of director generals of the different ministries. And we're working together with a high group of experts that tell us how to address the ethical, but also all other policy issues that we need to get. And we hope the 2 to get together between now and the end of the year with an ambitious plan on artificial intelligence. I started with the European strength because I do agree we have a lot of assets that we need to play on. And Europe can show the way and should show the way. I don't think I agree with Max. I don't think it's, a nice to have, i.e. a strong AI presence for Europe in technology, in industry, etc., in our values, etc. I don't think it's a nice to have, it's a must have. It's a must have for the whole economy and society, and we're completely conscious of this. We prioritize AI in our investments in research and development, we'll continue to do so. The ambitions are big, but hopefully that we can get the support that we want. Just to mention that, the European Union, because Max mentioned it, including our plan for AI, is not something to be designed only in Brussels and executed by the EU. Somebody says the EU is somewhere situated in Brussels. It's not that. It's a matter for all of us. It's a matter for all politicians in the Union, and we hope that collectively, all together, we can match what you mentioned, Max, as expectations.
Thank you. Peter, you wanted the word?
I agree. The Commission now suggests to put a lot more money on AI in the coming plans. The problem is that when you think about the Soviet Union, you think about these 5 years plans, but Europe has a 7-year budget. So it takes always time before you can make a change. When you see, oh, something is happening, it's not so easy to do fast moves here. The work for next 7 years budget is very good, but it's taking a few more years before it's implemented. So that's a problem. I think it's not only about more money, it's also about how you use the money. I think one important case is now we're trying to make a new center in Sweden, in Gothenburg. It's called a data factory and arena in Gothenburg, and that is an interesting case because if we want to get more excellent scientists and researchers to Europe and to the one that is good to stay here, we have to get the good environments for them to work with and open data and the possibility to use data from a lot of different companies and also public institutions. That is a very interesting case because normally in the world all companies and government they hold very tight to their data, but in this case we try to build a center where they got big possibilities to use data from a lot of different companies and also public institutions. That could be an interesting case to see.
Thank you. So, do we have a question from the audience? Yes, please go to the microphone.
So I'll try to keep this short and you'll ask if you don't understand. Francesca touched on the fact that this is a multi-stakeholder problem. And in my mind, there's at least 4 stakeholders. There's industry, academia, politicians, and let's call them humans. Those who don't have any other official stake in this, but still are very much affected. And then, of course, there's the different regions. There's Europe, China, the US, and a lot of other economical regions as well. So my question really is, how do where do the goals of all of these actors align in such a way that we can go from a zero-sum game to a mutual benefit? I hope to end this on a positive note.
Yeah. So I think that maybe you can say more, but I think the European Commission has also put together this EU alliance where everybody can give feedback on what is being done and where they can give suggestions of what to do about the future of AI in Europe and also the so-called humans in your terminology and all the other stakeholders. So you may say more about the mechanisms, but that's a place really where, a digital place where everybody should be able to contribute and respond to others and exchange ideas. And so those are the kind of mechanisms that we need to know what, and also many others possibly, to know, really the point of view and the angles and the worries and the concerns of everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, please do not hesitate. You can join the alliance.
Absolutely.
You
Thank
just
you very
Google
much.
it, EU AI Alliance, and it's on the web. There's a platform for ideas for everyone. And we created the high-level group of experts. We made sure that we have representatives of the civil society, from the unions to associations that deal with the ethical issues in Europe, in addition to academics, in addition to industry. So we tried to bring the whole community together. But we would like this representation of the whole society and the economy to be part of the alliance as well.
Please go ahead on the other side.
Yeah. Thank you all. My question is sort of like you've all talked quite a lot about investing in research, which I think is very important. But my main question is like, how do we take this into practice? The thing is, we need a lot of engineers. We need skilled engineers. the problem that I see is most of these companies that develop these products like Facebook, Google and so on, they're all American, or you have Baidu and all the Chinese, even Russian companies that are very skilled. But in Europe, we don't really have any of those huge, big companies that have the skilled engineers. And also, you mentioned CERN, and I sort of see that you can take it there like, you needed the engineers to actually build CERN and actually find something. Researchers are good because you need the theories, but you also need to take that into practice. So how are we to keep these good skilled engineers in Europe, and how are we to develop more products that are useful in practice and not just theory?
Well, I can speak for IBM. IBM has a strong presence in Europe with several research centers, but also development and customer centers as well. For example, IBM recently announced in France, the plan to have 1,800 more jobs. I think that Facebook and others are also present in France as well, with new centers, and Google as well. And so I think that more and more these companies are understanding also that the quality of European talents, and I think they are also understanding that they have a shared responsibility with governments and policymakers to really address the issues and concerns about the impact of this autonomy and technology on jobs. So I know that IBM has programs like P-Tech is a program, for example, where it tries to train people, young people, to then have the right skills to participate into an AI job market. But I think that more and more companies are making these commitments and sharing this responsibility in helping with skilling and reskilling their own workforce.
Morten, you wanted?
Yes. I think one of the great aspects of Europe is the diversity of its higher education institutions. And of course, we have been talking about the research track, but universities in Europe, Hochschulen, technical universities, research universities, they all fill in various parts of this puzzle. And the focus on teaching students also innovation in addition to research and in addition to engineering has been moving on nicely for years. We need, there are many programs in place in order to develop what you can, I don't know what you can call it, but it's a new generation of universities that are being evolving in Europe because of several things. What we have been discussing today, but also the very high education level. I mean, the number of people that go to universities. So universities, engineering schools, innovation business schools, they all play parts of this total game here. And it's a difficult but very necessary task to make this the pieces in this puzzle to fit together.
Okay, thank you. So, next question.
Hi. Many of you said that one of our strengths in Europe is our people. And many of you mentioned that one of our weaknesses is that those people are being lost to America or China. But none of you mentioned about the talent loss we're losing through a lack of diversity. And the many young people we have in our countries who aren't even considering AI or technology as a career for them. I'm wondering what you think as a community we can do as a strategy to try and tackle this problem.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question. I think, and it somewhat is related to the previous question. I think we really have to, as a community, articulate a vision for what AI, why AI is the big thing, and I don't mean doing this sort of fictionally. I mean really articulating a big vision for how the world is going to be completely transformed in the next 10, 15 years, and why it's an absolute no-brainer as to why they need to be part of that. So I think we need to excite people about what we do. We need to articulate. We need to show that this. we all know that this is multidisciplinary. It's ethicists, it's legal people, it's computer scientists, it's mathematicians, it's physicists. But we have to articulate that in a way that gets that into the mind of the 10-year-old and the 12-year-old, that they sort of see this as just a natural thing that they're going to do. And I think that's partly our role. So those of us that are educators, that's part of our role. But it's everybody's role. I think we have to paint that picture.
Thank you. Okay, final question.
My question is about funding. I think many senior researchers might agree that the engine of research departments are PhD students because they are the ones doing the work, basically. Well, so does the European Commission have specific ideas on how to promote master students or bachelor students into doing PhD education in something like AI and maybe using this as a regulation? Because maybe you could, if you have scholarships from the European Commission, you can allocate a certain number of scholarships for fundamental research, a number of scholarships for more applied research and these kind of things. Is there something specific that exists in the European Commission for this?
Yeah, well, there are schemes today to support PhD students moving to other countries. I mean, we have the Erasmus Plus scheme. We have the Marie Curie Fellowship that enable you to move to another country to do part of your PhD. But for AI in particular, we just announced 700 million euros of investments in advanced digital skills, mainly artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and advanced computing. This is part of the package that we just proposed with the idea of creating specific curricula that would address these particular issues. That's a proposal that is now in the digital program that we're proposing. We're shaping it up. It will address exactly what you meant. And it will have the two aspects. It would have the research excellence, but have also the engineering that was part of the. So we'll fund both type of actions. Researchers, PhD students, postgraduates, as well as new curricula for master degrees, specifically addressing AI. Now, we're designing this together with industry to make sure that for at least the engineering part, there is a link with the needs of industry and this evolution, because as Peter said, these things evolve, and we have budget for 7 years, so we need to make sure that we're flexible enough. We created a big alliance around digital across Europe. It's called the Skills Alliance, where we bring in the industry, the professionals in education and higher education in particular, researchers and academic community together into alliance to address the issue of skills and how it develops and where we should be. So that's part of what we currently do. The 700 million is part of the next package that is coming hopefully in 2020. That's
Thank you. So, I mean, we're kind of running out of time, but I really want to ask one question to both Peter and Khalil, namely, I mean, now you have the opportunity to address part of the leading AI researchers in the world. What would you like to see from us? What can we provide to you to make your job easier, or to help you inform your policies to make better decisions and better policies for us all?
Well, I think what Max is talking about is very good. Tell us if you see problems that has to be confronted, and go together and say this to the politicians in Europe and in the different countries, and then you will realize that things are not going so fast, but we are taking in and we listen, and maybe we will see results sooner than you believe, but not immediately.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Yeah, indeed. I think please join the Alliance on AI. That's very important. Tell us what about your views. Barry mentioned it. I think we're not helped in Europe by the fact that we are serene when it comes to communicating about what we do. People do not know about European technology. They think about it, and the press does not help us. When I see figures, you know, so I just take an anecdote about patents. There was a graph circulated in the press about the patents regarding robotics and AI. Showed that Europe is, you know, in the back, and then China, where a lot of the patenting is doing. So we took this and we checked it. Who's patenting in China? We discovered that 80% of the patents in China are done by European companies. That the largest companies today patenting in robotics are European. That's mainly Germany, France, UK, Sweden, that are the largest patenting. But they're patenting in China, of course, for reasons that we know. Some of them are patenting in the US when it comes to the software part for reasons that we know. So we have to be, we don't sell enough what we do. We don't sell enough what we do. We have the impression that we're bad. Sometimes there are facts, indeed, in terms of investments that in AI. Europe took you know, we were among the leaders, indeed, and we're now in the laggards. We need to do that effort to increase that investment, and we'll do it. We promised that we increase our investment at EU level by 70% in the next 3 years, 18, 19, 20 in AI. We do it, we show the figures. And from 2020 on, with the digital program and Horizon Europe, we will double that amount as well. So we will be, you know, 300% the level that we have in 17 that we will have in 21 in terms of investments in AI. We should get close to €1 billion investment at EU level, knowing that such an investment usually is matched by the member states and private sector, and our leverage is 10 to 15. This is what we've seen in the last 20 years. With euro you spend at EU level, it's matched usually by 10 to 15 times by the private sector and public sector. If we get these figures, we'll be in good shape in 21, 22. This is what we need. By working together, we do it. We need your help to tell us where to spend this money. I agree about the concentration. I like the idea of Claire, what Barry mentioned about the importance of basic research. It's clear, it's in our mind. We'll support that, but we don't do only basic research. We need to cover the whole spectrum, keeping in mind our scientific excellence, but also make sure that it's translated into innovative products and services. We'll work across the whole innovation chain. It's extremely important. You need to tell us also about how you feel it. Where should it be? The alliance and the portal that Francesca mentioned is extremely important. Tell us about it. I think what is important is that please do not hesitate to show what we do in Europe as well, wherever we are. Conferences like this are essential, That's what I would recommend, and please help us. I mean, we can design programs, we can put money, but if you're not on board, if you don't feel that it is for you, if you then tell us when we miss, it will be useless.
Thank you. So if I were to say 2 final words, it seems like to me the really important thing is to bring the excitement that we feel as researchers when we are approaching AI in our daily activities. That excitement we also have to transmit and show to the rest of the world, so that, as Barry said, that every 12-year-old boy and girl can feel that the same excitement and feel like that AI is really something that will help me in my life. And wherever I'm living, whatever I'm doing, it will be beneficial to me, and I want to be part of this, whether, maybe not necessarily as a researcher, but at least understanding these technologies, how they will affect me, and how I can educate myself to take advantage of this. The second thing that I'm taking with me after this panel is the importance of leadership. And in order to be a really good leader, I think you really need a vision. So, I mean, painting this vision which causes the excitement, but also makes it possible to take the leadership and make sure that Europe can really take the benefit of this technology. And, I mean, as we heard, I mean, Europe is actually in a relatively good position, but we need to show this leadership and make it come real. So with that, I would like to thank our esteemed panel and all of you that has listened and stayed on into the coffee break. Thank you very much.